Well, welcome everybody. Welcome to the Broadband in a COVID World legislative briefing. My name's Tom Gurr. I'm with the Pacific Technology Alliance. It's great to be with you here today. As all of you know, this pandemic that we are in right now has changed all aspects of our lives and has forced nearly every function of our lives to a virtual world, whether we're going to work or attending school or seeing the doctor. All of these daily functions have become online functions. And for many families and many communities, this is not an option, and they are simply getting left behind. And this is a serious problem that is vexing states across the United States and certainly here in the state of Washington. And as we head into the next legislative session, this will be a top priority issue for discussion. And what my goal here is today is I wanted to get together some leading folks on this issue, some experts that can help educate and inform legislators as they head into the session on sort of where things stand from a national perspective, where dollars are being spent there, when we can see some of those dollars here. Also, then I want to talk about things from a state perspective. What are some of the efforts that are underway here at the state of Washington, and how will those things impact our state in the future? So that, as I say, decisions that you make during the legislative session and where you decide to spend your political energy can be the most efficient and most effective way to identify the space with the greatest need. So with that, we'll get started, and we'll go over to our first speaker here in just a moment. But first, let me quickly just run down. I've got a list here of who RSVP'd. I want to point out the legislators that are here. And if, like I say, we're on a bit of a time crunch, if you could just say who you are and where you're from very quickly, that would be great. Why don't we start with Representative Maycumber?
Representative Jacqueline Maycumber, 7th Legislative District and House Republican Floor Leader. Thank you for having me.
Great, welcome, thank you. Representative Gregerson will be on in a moment. She's not here yet. Senator Short, is she able to get on?
I am. Welcome, and thank you so much. So I am the state senator for the 7th District, and thank you so much for convening this.
You bet. Welcome, Shelley. Thanks for coming. Let's see, Representative Eslick.
Good morning, Representative Carolyn Eslick from the 39th District, live in Sultan, Washington. Thank you for letting me be here.
Thank you. Welcome. Representative Levitt. Not here yet. Okay. She had RSVP'd. Representative Hackney.
Hi, Representative-elect David Hackney from the 11th District, Democrat, newly elected.
Welcome. Thanks for joining us. Senator Dozier, I see. I just saw a moment ago.
Yes, I'm Senator-elect Barry Dozier, 16th District, and happy to join. Thank you.
Welcome. I think we have a staff person from Representative Paul's office.
Hi, my name is Maisie. I'm Rep. Paul's legislative assistant, and he represents the 10th LD.
Great, thanks for coming. Representative Clicker, I saw earlier.
Yes, Representative-elect Mark Clicker, 16th District.
Thanks for joining us. Representative Schmick, I don't think is able to join. Let's see here. Representative Dent. Is he on yet? Nope. Okay. I see Representative Ibarra.
Yes, Representative Alex Ibarra from District 13, and Tom wasn't able to make it, so I'm here.
Oh, okay. Okay, great. Thank you for joining. Representative Voles on the phone.
Mike Volz, 6th District, Spokane.
Thanks for joining us, Mike. Representative Graham, I don't see her on the list. She was going to try. Doesn't look like she has made it. And Senator Erickson, was he able to join yet? No, we'll get back to Doug in a moment. And I think staff from Seattle City Council member Alex Peterson's office was planning to join as well. I don't know if they've made it on. Okay. Well, with that, guys, why don't we get started? We'll go over to our first speaker. Let me just make sure I've got screen share on here. I do. So our first speaker comes to us from the U.S. Telecom Association, Broadband Association, Lynn Follansby. She is Vice President of Policy and Advocacy for U.S. Telecom. She provides policy analysis, legal, and regulatory support on a range of issues, including broadband, universal service, telecom deregulation, privacy, and consumer protection. Lynn represents U.S. Telecom and its members before the FCC and the Federal Trade Commission, among many other federal agencies. So with that, Lynn, welcome. Thank you for coming and take it away.
Thank you so much for having me, Tom. It's a pleasure to talk to all of you today and just share with you a little bit about what's going on at the federal level. I will share my screen here and we'll start working through the presentation. Get to, all right. So obviously, as Tom pointed out at the top, it's sort of COVID all the time here, particularly in Washington, folks. That's what they're thinking about, and it is impacted broadband. U.S. Telecom represents a wide range of members, some of the biggest providers in the country, as well as very small and rural providers, and even Rainier Connect in the state of Washington is one of our members. So we are staying very much on top of what's going on in broadband and what's been impacted by the COVID pandemic. I just want to run through some of the major initiatives that are going on both at the FCC and some of the other agencies, as well as Capitol Hill, to cover that for you. As you likely are aware, there is an RDOF auction going on. It's the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund auction. It is a $20 billion reverse auction to put money into closing the digital divide. $20 billion overall, but it's in two parts. Phase one is the part that's underway right now. That is an auction of unserved areas, $16 billion. In Washington State, I looked it up to see what was going on there, and there's about 1,400 census block groups that are eligible, which is 103,000 eligible locations, with the total reserve price for all those areas of just under $55 million. The funds for when this auction wraps up, which it started October 23rd, so will likely wrap up, from what I'm hearing, the rumor mill is in the next few weeks. And those funds will be authorized after the auction participants file a long form application with the FCC. It should be early 2021, and that support will be for 10 years. Then phase two, that's sort of undetermined when that will start. It will be anything that was left unauctioned in the phase one, as well as an additional $4 billion plus that is set aside for partially unserved census blocks. One of the things that's important to note here about this RDOF money is that this is essentially recycled price cap money. So the price cap carriers are your big providers. They're participating in the CAF program. That program ends. This year is their 6th year. Most of them have opted for the optional 7th year, which is next year. But essentially, this is the same USF budget that's been in play for a long time. It is also important to note that for your smaller providers, the existing USF program budgets, for those that selected ACAM or rate of return, those legacy programs have not had budgets grow at all over time. So it is very important that the states that have broadband programs or offer supplemental support to those providers continue to do so, because those programs are not growing at the current time. Another major initiative this year, and this is something that I personally worked very hard on, and it is the digital opportunity data collection. This is a companion to the RDOF auction. The idea being that we need to get better maps if we're really going to close the digital divide. The FCC started the DOTC proceeding, and shortly thereafter, the Congress adopted and was signed into law the Broadband Data Act. They are essentially the same thing. The DOTC program had started along the path, and the Broadband Data Act just essentially wrote it into law. What it does is it requires service providers to submit their service areas in a polygon or shape file. Currently, they submit based on sort of a one served, all served on FCC Form 477. So if they cover at least one location in a census block, the FCC considers the entire census block served, which we all know is not very accurate and has led to some of the complaints about FCC Form 477 data. The DOTC proceeding and the Broadband Data Act also adopt the Broadband Serviceable Location Fabric. That is a data set that tells where there are all locations throughout the United States that need broadband. It's something that US Telecom was instrumental in getting passed. We worked very hard. We did a pilot program on it in Missouri and Virginia to show that it worked. And on the next slide, I'll talk to you a little bit about why that's important. In addition, the Data Act and the DOTC will include a challenge process and a verification process, the use of crowdsourcing and assistance for small providers, which is important to make sure that the maps stay up to date and are right. Why the fabric with the polygons on top are so important is that the fabric is going to improve your granularity of what's served and what's not served. We found in our pilot project that 38% of rural locations that were reported as served were actually unserved. That's a big number. So that's going to correct for that. It also is going to improve accuracy as to the number of locations. We found in our pilot 48% of the rural locations counts don't actually match. That's in part because they're done on the census block level, which is outdated information very quickly given the census block, the census is only done every 10 years. It's also going to improve precision by creating uniform geocoding. In our pilot, we discovered that 61% of rural locations were not actually at the correct structure location. That's in part because commercial geocoders give you a wide range of coordinates for the same location, depending on which geocoder you're using. And so we're going to get that much more accurate with the DOTC proceeding. Other efforts outside of the FCC or NTIA has also been doing a mapping effort for the last couple of years that we think is really a good companion to what the FCC has been doing. They have been collecting state data, which is wonderful. Some of the states like Georgia have actually done good work and done something very similar to what the DOTC effort is going to look like. We've always said from the beginning at US Telecom, the more data, the better when it comes to mapping. So NTIA's collection of state data will be helpful in informing what's out there. And the key piece that they've done is they've created a platform for viewing that data. And this is something that we hope over time, the FCC and NTIA will sort of merge their efforts so that the FCC's data can be viewed via perhaps the wonderful platform that NTIA has created. Additionally, at RUS, they have been well underway of their Reconnect program for the last couple of years, and it's about $200 million in grants, up to $200 million for 50-50 grant loan combinations, $200 million for low interest loans. And these are all for rural areas lacking fixed service of at least 10-1. On the Hill this year with the CARES Act, which was the big original relief package, as you all well know, the broadband components of that were $200 million for the FCC to award for telehealth services. They have pushed that out the door very quickly as soon as it came in. They gave another $25 million to USDA for distance learning, telemedicine and their broadband program, another $100 million funding for the Reconnect program that I just mentioned, $13.2 billion to the Department of Education for Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund, which includes educational technology. So that's a key piece of, as we all know, in the COVID world, the schools online has been a big concern for many, and that relief bill included some money for that. With respect to what's going to happen in January, we'll get a second stimulus package off the ground. The HEROES Act, as you have probably heard mentioned, is something that has been passed by the House, has not been voted on in the Senate. We don't necessarily anticipate that the HEROES Act as is will get adopted, but the way that our government affairs folks describe it is something HEROES Act light. So it will end up being some sort of a compromise bill that will likely get passed shortly in the first part of the year. And one of the things that was in the HERO Act that we hope will be to be part of it if it gets passed is this Emergency Broadband Connectivity Fund, which is $8.8 billion. Another piece that's hanging out there as far as appropriations is actually funding the maps at the FCC. The Broadband Data Act requires the FCC to implement the fabric and the new reporting. The FCC does need money for that. There is a current appropriation set. It's a little low at the Senate Commerce Committee. It's about 15 million. I think the FCC is looking probably for something a little closer to 40. So that's still being negotiated. And the question is just whether or not it will come during the lame duck or whether it will be something that waits until January. The next thing I just wanted to talk about is there's been a lot of discussion about whether or not broadband should be treated as a utility. I think there's a lot of folks that say, well, you know, we all know that the COVID-19 pandemic has made it very clear that broadband is essential to Americans as power and water. However, when we talk about utility regulation, that tends to be a very sort of strong regulatory model. And for broadband, given that there is a continual need to innovate, US Telecom and others in our members believe that light touch regulation is really the key. Some of the reasons why the utility model should not be emulated, I've got here at time. If you look back actually at the history of regulating electric, it took about 25 years to go from 10% coverage to 70% coverage. And it took in that same amount of time, only 15 years to do that for broadband. So if you aggregate out that timeline, it will be another 30 years or so before broadband could fully match the pace of electricity adoption. Price. Broadband prices have actually not risen as fast as electricity and are currently in decline. US Telecom earlier this year released its broadband pricing index, and just a few key findings for you. Some of the most popular tiers of broadband service in 2015 are now priced about 20% lower, and they offer about 16% faster speeds on an average subscriber basis. Those are the ones that consumers chose. As far as what's being offered in 2015, those prices are now 37, almost 38% lower with about 28% faster speeds. I can provide folks if they're interested in the full report, but it's important to note that electricity prices under heavy regulation, and actually, you know, essentially they're a monopoly as well. These prices have managed to decline much faster in the broadband space. So as far as innovation, I mentioned that light touch regulation allows for superior innovation. During COVID in the US, we actually have found that our networks have been quite resilient, given that it was a very quick transition in March. Everybody went home and started working at home and going to school at home, and all of the increased streaming from Netflix and everything else that folks were doing once they were quarantined, the networks did really, really well. In Europe, where those networks were more heavily regulated, they saw some real speed reductions during the initial phases, first couple months of quarantine. I just wanted to show you this little chart about light touch regulation and why it's important. If you just look at in 2015, when the regulation model for broadband was considerably tighter, it was the amount of money that was spent started to drop when there was higher regulation. And then as it was lightened in 2017, you can see it go back up. So, you know, just to sort of put it all into perspective, utility style regulation is essentially something we think would just take broadband backwards. You know, it doesn't benefit competition as far as our competitive levels of our providers in our country as well as outside of our country. It doesn't really help the teachers or the families or the businesses and those working from home. When we're relying on broadband more than ever, it sort of would be a mistake, we think, to go and change the course now and shift gears to a more heavily regulated model for broadband. I'm willing to take some questions about some of this material. I just put up on the slide my contact information, and I can give it to Tom, and he has it. And I'm happy to share, like I said, any of the data I've mentioned. We've got a variety of those things available on the US Telecom website. Let me end screen sharing here.
So great, thank you, Lynn. I appreciate that. Any questions for Lynn based on some of that information that she just provided? Well, I will offer one question. Oh,
I see
sorry.
some hands there. Yeah.
Representative Barr, go ahead.
Just a quick one. It's not so much, you know, one of the ideas we had here in the state of Washington is, I actually work for Grant County PUD, a public utility. We put in fiber across the county in rural Washington. One of the suggestions I made back in the past, another broadband group, well, why don't we use the utilities to put in the infrastructure of fiber, whatever you want to use, where it seems feasible to do that, just because we've got the expertise now in some of our counties in central Washington, where other counties sitting, you know, 20 feet away from me don't have a public utility. But I was thinking that we could use the utilities as a infrastructure type company in order to get the fiber or get the broadband into those areas that do not have it.
Yeah, we have seen when we've had members in other parts of the country that have successfully partnered with utilities, and we think sometimes that's a good model where rather than waste money overbuilding systems, you know, it's certainly beneficial to get broadband out quickly, but we don't want to create an overbuilding situation. So in a lot of cases where providers have really successfully partnered with utilities in their area, that has been a way to go in some cases.
Any others?
I see.
Yes.
Representative Hackney. Looks like.
Yes. Back in a former life, I applied for a lot of RUS grants for a small startup company that was doing high-speed broadband in rural areas. How is the RUS? How effective are they working now? And is it all last mile solutions? And how much are they actually? They actually didn't award any just back in the day. After tons of effort, how effective they are now.
Yeah, you know, there are still the original RUS loan programs, the Community Connect programs, and those are still out there, and they are still utilized. Their focus in recent years has been on their Reconnect program specifically, which is it's a new pot of money that they were sent. And I see Betty raising her hand. I think she might have something to say about RUS. If you want to jump in, go ahead, Betty.
If I might, please, Representative Hackney and others, I'm Betty Buckley. I'm the Executive Director of the Washington Independent Telecommunications Association, and I represent all of the small rural telecoms in the state, including those in my home district of the 7th. Nice to see 7th District strong today. So we have been recipients of RUS grants, both the old Communities Connect grants and the Reconnect grants. So I'm sitting at Hood Canal Communications today because I actually live in one of those areas that doesn't have good broadband, but they do here at Hood Canal. And Hood Canal has received, I'd have to ask Mike, who's next door, I think it's been 3 RUS grants, these Connect grants, and Whidbey Tel just received a Reconnect grant to expand service and fiber service, particularly in the Point Roberts area. So we've had good luck working with the RUS. We would like to have better luck, and I'm hoping that Russ Elliott helps us do that. But it's as far as we're concerned, it's a thumbs up for RUS.
Good.
Senator Short.
Thanks so much. Lynn, really appreciate you being with us today. You made a comment that I just really keyed in on, and that was the states, it's important for the states to continue to offer supplemental funding to the small providers. And I agree with you. My question to you, and by the way, those are always in danger because they say they're not needed. You know, we beg to differ. Is there any other helpful, like points you can those in the legislature to make sure that that happens? Because there's always pressure for money going different directions, and I do believe that it's important, and just wondered if you had anything you could share.
Well, I think that, the COVID pandemic, if there's not a greater life experience that shows that broadband is very, very important and the key to keeping the economy going, I don't know what is. I think it's, everything has shifted online, telehealth, schooling, everything. And so, honestly, our plan at US Telecom next year on a national level is to continue to talk to those in Congress about what we've learned from this pandemic, how important resilient networks are. And we're going to continue to ask for more money. We've been trying to get the USF budget and the contributions reform going, and we're going to really make a big push for that once the new administration is underway, because it is very clear that this is not something that folks can live without anymore, and we need to get to those rural areas. The FCC had planned for years. They've talked about a remote areas fund. Never happened. Remote areas are essentially these, what we call really very high cost rural areas. So, and that's parts of the country that are still sitting out there unserved. I think we're going to learn a lot with the results of the RDOF auction that will be wrapping up here in the next few weeks. And we'll see what kinds of prices were paid, what kinds of providers are willing to serve those areas. And we'll have a lot more data about what's economically possible. But there's just a lot of parts of the country where there really is no business case without support for broadband providers to stay there.
So with that, we'll move along in our schedule here so we can stay on track, and we'll have some more time for Q&A. Thank you though, Lynn, I appreciate it. And Lynn will certainly still be on as we move forward here. And I want to note there's been a few requests in the comments there for her report. It will be posted with the this video on our website. I put the address there. I will mention it again, and I will also send it out to the RSVP list of folks that are attending here. So you'll have every chance to review the material that Lynn just went through. But I wanted to get to our next speaker. He was just mentioned, and I think his comments will bring some of this together a little bit. Russ Elliott, who is director of the Office of Broadband here in Washington State. Before coming to Washington, Russ finalized Wyoming's broadband plan. He facilitated a new broadband mapping project and implemented a broadband infrastructure grant throughout Wyoming. Before his work in the public sector, Russ spent 11 years working to connect rural communities to quality, affordable internet while serving as president of Brainstorm Internet. So with that, Russ, it's a pleasure to have you. Welcome. Please feel free to dive right in.
Hey, Tom, thank you. And how cool is it to be here with all these people that I work with on almost a daily basis? I see a lot of smiles. Rep Eslick and I we snuck around and got to meet each other last week. It was good to see you. And obviously I work with Betty, and there's Rep Maycumber and Senator Short. I mean, hello, everyone. It's good to see you. And it's cool that we're rallying around this. COVID has certainly brought an accelerated level of interest around this topic, obviously. And for those of you, many of you on this call I see are from our rural eastern side. The issue really hasn't changed a whole lot pre-COVID to COVID, other than the importance of broadband. It's important, right? We know it's important. The other thing that's happening now is the quality of the service we have is even more critical, right? That's the one, right? We, having grown up in rural America, building networks in rural America, come from a rural state, having just done their broadband, and now, working with the rural parts of this state. Broadband is a challenge, and we knew it going into COVID. We know it coming, during COVID. We're going to know it going out of COVID. It's still going to be a challenge. So nothing's changed. That's a big challenge, an economic challenge, a funding challenge. We have to talk about that. It's also an identification challenge. So we'll talk more about that. But I couldn't be happier to be here. Thank you for giving me some time. And I'll dive into a screen share and a slideshow. Now, many of you have seen this song and dance I've done before. But some of you are elect, so this is going to be great. We're going to have an opportunity to get introduced and talk more about the broadband office, what we're trying to do, and how you might be able to be engaged. So I am Russ Elliott. I'm the director of the Washington State Broadband Office. I work in commerce and with the governor. I've got 20 minutes, so I'm going to be blowing through this, but you're going to get this. You'll get this slideshow at the end, and we can talk more about it when it's done. 5511 got stood up last year because of some good work in the state about the fact that broadband's got to be important pre-COVID, right? So everybody had a focus on it then. Then I was the wallflower of the dance. Now I'm the prom king, based on the fact that COVID has turned this into a bigger and badder concern. So one of the really forward-thinking things that this state did, and I know Betty and I go back and forth on this every once in a while, but I'm going to hang on to this as the moonshot. By 2028, we're looking for 150 symmetrical in this state for all citizens. That's a lofty goal. That's a moonshot goal. That's the most aggressive goal in the country. I'm proud to be the guy that gets to be leading that effort. And I'm not going to let it go, because I believe symmetrical broadband is where we need to start talking. I think we need to start talking about and let go of the speeds. You know, Lynn was earlier, she's talking about RDOF. I'll get into that a little bit, but she talks about the fact that USDA right now is 10-1 as their critical factor for broadband. That's a throwout, right? That was 10 years technology, and even RDOF is going to be funding 25-3 infrastructure for 10 years. Now they're giving scalable awards based on the nature of the network, but it's still antiquated. It's not future proof. We're not thinking forward, and we need a lot more consideration. So I'm proud as a state to be leading the way on this discussion. 2026, gigabit connectivity anchor institutions. All this means is fiber to our cities and business corridors. If we get it there, we can start to talk about distribution of fiber, and once it's out there. So this is a good goal as well. So we're talking about that, measuring that as well. Here's the challenge. It's exactly what I think Lynn kind of alluded to as well. We've got a lot of providers in areas where there's a lot of people in these urban areas. We've got tremendous opportunity. We've got great service. We have providers here that are doing a phenomenal job in this state, and especially in areas where there's opportunity. But as the population wanes, so does the interest. And as the population continues to wane, so does the revenue. And as the revenue wanes, so does everything, right? Networks and everything. As I was mentioning last week, Rep. Eslick and I were meeting in Snohomish County, just side of Everett, not too far away. And that happened to fall in kind of this area right here. And the conversation is, well, how do you make this work? If it's below the break-even number, how do we make that work, and what's going to happen there? So we've got to get creative in this space. This isn't going to go away. This is a space we have to work in. The Universal Service Fund is there for Betty's creative companies and the good work they're doing. We probably need to bolster that in this state and have a little creative conversation around what that's going to look like, so we can continue to have that conversation. But this is just the infrastructure build part, right? We're going to have to talk about equity and inclusion. I'll talk about that in a little bit as well. But this is the area, and this is the slide I think that tells the best story. How are we gonna get around that? I contend, Lynn talks about RDOF. I'm going to tell you right now that RDOF has not been good for the state of Washington the last 2 rounds. RDOF is considered and have to awarded 60% of this state's awards to geo satellite. So we have been aced out of a lot of opportunity to get more funds. And currently, for those of you on the eastern side, RDOF was not available in Stevens, Ferry, or Pend Oreille County because all are considered 100% served. I think you guys would agree that's probably not a good story to tell. And it's because of mapping. And as Lynn alluded to, the FCC is working on trying to define a more granular map. NTIA just spent $20+ million on a better map. Washington State's done a really good job building a map that's really compelling and making a difference in how we do things here. We believe it's a community up discussion. We're going to have to start talking with communities. As Lynn alluded to, these deep rural areas, it needs those community players in there to start to identify and help support the conversation and be more intelligent in the table as to what we're going to be talking about. We need to support policies at the state that will help some of this happen, and we'll talk more about. And there is not a private answer. It is a public-private discussion, period. Anybody tells you anything different, they're wrong. And I'll go to the mat on that one. You know, privates are going to do great work, and we got to continue to honor that investment. We got to continue to help them be better at that. In Snohomish County, we had a major player in the state at the table with us, having a conversation and creative discussions around how could maybe some public funds help encourage that private build in that area, because that's where the success lies. We need to talk about that. Public networks, PUDs are killing it too. You know, Grant is doing a great job. Chelan, Douglas, Kitsap, Mason 3. We've got PUDs that are doing good work too. Got to be careful that we're not overbuilding to the point of Lynn's discussion as well. We believe this is our model going forward. You're going to see a bunch of this. I'm going to be bringing it to you all legislative session. We have to start with our partnering. We have to begin at the community level. We have to bring our broadband action teams. I see my friend Monica Babine from Washington State University on here. This her baby. We've adopted it at the state level. Broadband action teams. We believe those are the teams that are going to be in the communities and include anchor institutions. It includes economic drivers and players in those areas. It includes our last mile providers. It includes our middle mile providers. We need to have better conversation with more people at the table so we can talk intelligently about what it is we're trying to get done. We don't want to have a morning coffee club, you know, and sit around and talk about broadband and how it's important and how it's affecting our lives. We're done with that. It's time to act. The only way we're going to act is get creative in our community levels where communities can start to really quantify the conversation. From there, the state needs to help you with the communities with identifying that gap, getting those shovel-ready projects together, doing feasibility study work, the technical assistance stuff that these communities don't know what to do. You know, they understand they got a problem, but they're not sure how to take it to the next level. So this office is standing up feasibility studies and packaged with grant writing. So if I can get the feasibilities in the grant writing, we can then get to the federal level and go access some of those funds. We believe that this is a multi-billion-dollar challenge for Washington State, right? We're in an economic challenging time right now. We're not going to see a lot of money. We're going to see some funds come here, but we believe it's a multi-billion-dollar problem. As Lynn said, we got to go chase those federal funds. This office has to be a super MVP at federal funds and get those federal funds to the providers, get those federal funds to the communities, and perhaps if we see some type of a stimulus, perhaps the feds would look kindly on the states to see, hey, the states really have some knowledge in this space. Maybe we can allocate some state block grant and let them be creative in their approach with those funds. I'm going to be pushing hard for that at the state level. So we find the funds, we help with the grant writing, we then get the building of scalable future-proof networks that are in line with our state goals. We've got unique state goals. We want a network that are both to our goals. And then in the end, obviously, we want to support the digital equity inclusion piece. Doesn't matter that you got it. If you can't afford it, you don't have the tools, you don't have the skills, nothing else matters, right? So we have to continue to support digital equity. Again, that falls back to the front of this. That's a community level discussion. Digital equity in King County is way different than digital equity in Lincoln County. And we need to have those conversations, allow those communities to build very unique digital equity plans for their communities, make certain that we're taking care of folks, especially in our central part of agricultural Washington, where we have some need. I gave a presentation to immigrant families the other day. There's a desperate need for us to be paying attention to the folks that absolutely need broadband and help those folks get it, afford it, and use it. Here's my 4 areas of focus, and I'm gonna fast forward this one because I'm gonna go straight into each one of them. One, we want to maximize federal and private sector funding. That's what we have to do. We don't have enough money in the state to get this done. There's going to be this is an unprecedented time for federal funds. Currently, we're in the middle of a Community Connect grant. I'm proud to say that in the past we've had 1 or 2 applications come in. I believe it's my job to try to get more interest in this. It looks like we're going to have about 8 or 9 applications this round. It closes December 23rd. That's a win for the state of Washington. Just to be at the table when the dinner bell rings is a win. The next is to take that to the next level, and hopefully we've created quality shovel-ready projects that are going to invest in. Challenges. USDA Community Connect this round, even though it's doubled up, it's only $70 million. Not a lot of money. That's for the nation, right? That's not a lot of money. So we hope we get our fair share of that, and we continue to have some success in that space. We do understand that Reconnect will probably pop after the first of the year. I think it'll probably be an inflated Reconnect, potentially up to $1 billion. Some inside knowledge I have. If that happens, we can reap the community stuff for Reconnect. We need to continue to just be throwing shovel-ready projects at the federal government so we can be receiving some of those funds. One of the things that we found as a challenge in this is that now we're getting people to the table, we're getting them through the application process and technical assistance. But in Eastern Washington, I'm working with the Colville tribe, the Spokane tribe, Kalispell, these folks over there, Stevens County, they don't have the matching funds. You know, instead of the state going dollar for dollar in infrastructure projects, how about if the state invests $1 and gets 4 or 8 on the federal side? I think that's a way more intelligent way for us to spend state dollars, and I'll be trying to champion a federal match program to see that we get the type of support we're going to need for our friends and folks that are in less economically advantaged areas. That's our big thing. And then we need to continue to get these shovel-ready projects through mapping initiatives and address the barriers that some of our private sector friends are having the network, and we'll be talking about that as well. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here. This is just scalable, future-proof networks. If there's a stimulus package that pops, and I'm going to be borrowing against my 5-year-old's future because he'll be paying it back in 20 years, I better be putting in the ground infrastructure that will be used by him in 20 years. I better not be putting money toward Band-Aid solutions that are not going to be around when it comes his time to pay back the money that we're going to borrow today. Address last mile issues. I've already talked about this. The bottom half of that slide there was the area that's very much a challenge. It's, you know, it costs 20% to build to 80% of the market. It costs 80% to build that last 20% out. That's a monster challenge. We have to figure out how to take care of that. We have to figure out how to get that funded. We have to be creative. The conversation earlier was, you know, PUDs and potentially using some of the public infrastructure partnerships. I 1,000%. PUDs can go and get 30-year money from RUS, and they can get it, and they don't have that need for 12-month, 18-month return. I think there's an opportunity here for our public partners to build infrastructure to allow for the private partners to play. You see it going on in Grant. I think Grant County's got 14 or 17 providers riding on their open access infrastructure. That's a win. They don't have to have that infrastructure payback in 18 months. Whereas our private partners, they've got an obligation on a return investment to their investors. They got to get that back a little bit quicker. So we have to honor that. We have to, it's just what it is. We don't talk about it as a bad thing. It's what it is, and how are we going to solve it? So we need to continue on the last mile discussions. Digital equity inclusion, this is the 800-pound gorilla that reared its head during COVID, right? This all of a sudden becomes King County and all of our big populated areas, all of a sudden seeing people that could use their home, that could use their school and work computers as their primary source of internet. Now we're at home and they don't have internet, and they're in a bad situation because they don't have a job and they can't afford it. So it becomes this mess where they're not able to communicate, they're not able to participate, and they're not able to better their lives. They can't afford it. So we need to talk about an affordability metric and program for this state. We need to talk about tools. We're seeing that with OSPI in our schools here. We should just go one-to-one devices in the state. There should be no more conversation about that. We shouldn't be monkeying around with who has a device and who doesn't. We should just go one-to-one device to students in this state. It just this is 10-year-old thought process, right? Let's get all the kids to have a device. My kids in kindergarten and in a school district over here, they give them a device. We should just go one-to-one. And then the skills building, we need to talk about that. Washington State's doing some creative stuff along with Central Washington around some of that skills building and worker remote training. We need to invest in that and really get behind that. It's an exciting time for that stuff that's going on. Back to the mapping. So as Lynn was saying, that the FCC is asking for a bunch of money to get the mapping done. I don't disagree that the FCC better right now from maps. They allocated $16 billion into the public without understanding where that infrastructure needs to go. Huge loss, huge miss, huge swing and a miss. I'm really disappointed. We'd really tried hard to have them reconsider this and wait for better data, but they didn't. Nothing we can do about that. So what we've done has been proactive here. We've stood up our own broadband map here. It's having success. It's having traction. We now have over 40,000, we have 41,000 plus data spots on this map. It's really allowing us to tell a very clean story about where we have connectivity and where we don't. It also is allowing us to collect some of that digital equity data around, hey, I don't have it because I can't afford it, or I don't have it because I don't have the tools to use it. I don't have it because it's not available. I don't have it because I don't know why I'd need it, right? So there's a lot of that going on. And as we collect that information, this is that layer that says, I don't have it. Well, why don't you have it? We collect the data around that. Now we have to talk more specifically around areas that potentially we need to help with affordability metrics or with skills building and that kind of stuff. It's critical we get better at quantifying this discussion. It is critical. And all I can do as a state is stand up. What we can do here, we wait for the NTIA to do their mapping stuff. Matter of fact, the NTIA is looking at our map and they're enamored by our map, and they've asked for our data. So they're ingesting our data in the NTIA map so that they have more specific location-based data. Broadband's no longer a broad discussion. We're now door to door, street to street. It's Swiss cheese, and we have to start to talk about it in that terms. And the only way we're going to be good at that is to quantify the conversation. So it really takes a state level participation in this conversation. We kind of got onto the mapping support. So we really, the more dots we have, the better opportunity we're going to have to go get those federal funds. It's been proven. Betty mentioned that Whidbey Telephone. I'm excited to announce that Whidbey leveraged our feasibility study. Whidbey leveraged our mapping initiative, and Whidbey also leveraged our recommended grant writing partner. So they're a proof of concept right now, and they were recipients of Reconnect money. Proud of those guys. They did a great job, and to tell you the truth, USDA used our map to vet that application to make certain that data was correct. So we're on the right path. We're doing good things, and this has all been done in this last year. So I'm proud of the work we're doing. I'm excited about the work we're doing in the state too. I saw Mara's on here. I'd be remiss not to mention Public Works Board and the great work they're doing. They just finished their construction cycle. They had about $17 million they've allocated to statewide programs. They're going to go back to the legislature, try to get more funds for more infrastructure programs. Highly support everything that's going on with them. It's a good organization. Curb is doing good work too here in the state. Again, but we need billions, right? So we've got a couple of ways to look at this. We continue to fund infrastructure programs. Let's look at some matching money for some of these federal dollars for these communities that are less advantaged, and let's start to get smart about this and take advantage of an opportunity that's unique in time. Emerging technologies. Hopefully you caught this about a month and a half ago. We had a very exciting announcement where our partners at the Ho Tribe took a risk. They partnered up with Elon Musk and the SpaceX group, and I'm excited to announce that this tribe that was basically unserved at the time when I talked to them at the beginning of COVID, they were having a storm. They didn't have cell phone. They didn't have power. They didn't have broadband. And now they're thinking about COVID and shelter in place. These poor people were looking at a very dark time, and it became one of the things that I really wanted to do is how can I support these guys? How can I help them? And we started working on a wireless solution, which we're still working on to help them get kind of redundancy over there. But this opportunity came up, and matching SpaceX and Starlink with the Ho Tribe became a tremendous opportunity for them to take a risk with the technology, and for Elon Musk and his team to prove out their technology. Proud to announce the first one in the country to do this, and I'm also proud to announce now that the Ho Tribe members all have a SpaceX dish on their homes, and all of them are getting about 100 megabit download speeds with about a 50 megabit upload speed with a 20 millisecond latency. This is incredible. They've gone from being the most unconnected people in this state to being better connected than probably 85% of the people in this state. I am proud of the work that the Ho Tribe did. I'm proud of the work that Starlink did, and this is great. But this is another discussion around emerging technologies. We have to be technologically agnostic in last mile delivery. We have to be. We can't just get enamored by fiber, even though I like it. I like fiber. I think fiber needs to go out as far as it can, but there's got to be some realistic cost discussions around this and what it's going to take. So this office spends a lot of time working with its partners in the state. We're lucky we're in a technologically advanced state with having Amazon here. They've got a low Earth program that's going on. Called Kuiper. Vista, you guys all out on the east side know of Vista. They've got some very compelling technology that's going to be proof of concept relatively soon here in some of the eastern part of this state. 2.5 gigahertz, excited about the work that got done there with the tribes, and some of the 5G cellular, the Microsoft White Space Airband. All these things are in our quiver of opportunity for deployment and development. What you can do next as leaders in your districts and in your counties and in your regions, start to talk more intelligently locally. Start to help those local groups get together. Start to really take take concern and time in identifying those shovel-ready projects. Get behind that, because that's the only way we're going to be successful. We can't say, hey, we just need money. What we have to say is, hey, we need money for this project we've identified that we've now quantified that is unserved in this area, right? In Snohomish County, I had a group up there that said, hey, our broadband stinks. And I said, I can't quantify stinks. What does that mean? They say, well, it stinks. We got bad broadband. I said, okay, you got homework. Go do the speed test and tell me, and get your neighbors to do it. Well, I'm proud to say that subdivision did its homework. And I got a very compelling data set right now that subdivision's connectivity is about 5 megabit down by less than 1 up. We have quantified the conversation. We have identified them as unserved, and that is a project that we are going to get fixed, right? That's the way we need to start talking about broadband in this state. And as legislators, I encourage you to get more engaged at that level of conversation. Let's not just talk about it. Let's act on it. Let's get busy. Let's start to identify these things. Get your communities to take the speed test. Let's get the survey on there. Let's get the dots on there so that we can be a much more prepared for these federal funds. Like I said, USDA Community Connect is open now, closes September 23. Reconnect will open sometime after the first of the year. It'll close 45 to 60 days after it opens. Then we're going to have stimulus. Who knows what that looks like? Hopefully we're going to get some of that. We'll need to have some shovel-ready projects for that. So your help on the speed test survey, your help on continuing to talk intelligent around your community. I end it with this always: what gets measured gets done, as I believe that is 100% true, and that's where our challenges have been, but that's where Washington State's starting to excel. So I appreciate the time, and I look forward to some questions.
Well, thank you, Russ. That was a great presentation, and clearly you've done that a few times. Well done. We're a little bit behind on time here, and we will get to some questions for Russ. But before we do, there's 2 other agenda items I want to get to. So I'll go ahead and wedge them in here, and then let's save time after that for questions for Russ. First, I invited Representative Gregerson here to talk a little bit about some work that she is doing on her internet crisis team. It's been a great organization. I've been participating when I can there. It's a collection of stakeholders from a variety of different walks of life, industries, etc., talking about digital equity and ways that we can solve many of these problems. Russ referenced them a bit in his presentation, but I really feel like some of the work that she's doing is critical and very important. And I wanted to give her a couple minutes here just to tell us a little bit about it and how we might be able to participate with the organization as well.
Well, thank you, Tom. For the record, my name is Mia Gregerson. I represent the 33rd Legislative District, which is South King County, so in suburbs. And great. So last year during session, we worked on a bill, House Bill 2414. And what that did is it really opened up the space to start talking about digital equity and inclusion with the idea of it's a 3-legged stool, right? So you have the leg of infrastructure, and then you have devices, and then you have literacy, right? So those are the 3 legs of the stool. And when COVID came roaring in, it really had lots of folks, and many folks here in this space today, interested in coming together to really figure out what to do as a response. And as you can imagine, through lots of different diverse backgrounds all around the state, we were able to come up with shared definition. I mean, if you think about what some of these definitions are, we hadn't really come together to understand what that was. So you'll see we did this in a way that was very organic. It's open to everyone, including you. We've recorded every meeting. We take notes. It was on a drive, and now to share it with the idea that anyone can see it, view it, use it to support your own efforts. As Russ talked about, the mapping efforts. When we tried to do surveys, everybody knows in the very beginning, everyone was doing a survey, and they were all in different formats, all in talking to different constituents and measuring different things. An example was the principals were all talking about how hotspots weren't working. Well, when you start breaking that down, hotspots meant something different to everybody. So that's just an example of where this IACT group was able to come together. We heard updates. We hear updates from Monica, Babine, through the CTCs and universities. We hear from Russ Elliott, the governor's office and broadband. We hear from Betty through the providers. And you'll see Lori Lippold on here. So we hear from nonprofits, community-based organizations doing some of that on the ground work. Mara's here, the tribes, Public Works Board, and of course, legislators thinking meet frequently and update each other. So we're very excited to really help others start to take on their own legislative priorities. I think you see the one pager by the cities, you hear about the WASDA, the school board directors talking about it. And so thank you, Tom, for letting us sort of talk about this space. And there's lots of folks here that know a lot about IACT and the benefits of it. And it's a growing body, and happy to invite anyone here that's interested. Thanks.
Yes, thank you. And I will post again on our website the link to Representative Gregerson's group IACT, and you can reply there to sign up to be part of her weekly calls. I think they're every Thursday, if memory serves. It's this afternoon.
Yeah, you know, so we had, moving forward, you had no idea we're going to be out over 30 weeks of this, but yes, we've been meeting every week since the beginning, and I think start closing it down in preparation for session. And so with that, we're trying to figure out what to do with that space. For those that are familiar with the Food Policy Forum, that's an example, I think, of how this forum can really become a space where folks from all different backgrounds, political stances that are part of this greater, bigger system can have a say and come together with shared values, shared ideas, approaches, and actually just be a smarter state from it. So that's really the hope and the vision of this work. Cybersecurity has been a big deal, right? And that happened in the middle of this term. So you'll see a lot of efforts around that and shared learnings from that. So probably the end of December will be it for it until session, but happy to continue to have folks meet each other, have smaller group meetings, and then pick it back up again when or if necessary. Thanks.
Great. Well, thank you very much. And I will include that information in our follow-up material. And I also invited Representative Maycomber to talk a little bit about some of the work that she has done. She has been a leader on rural broadband, been very involved in the issue, and certainly comes from a rural district where, you know, the front lines of this issue, so to speak, exist. And I wanted to give her just a few moments to, as we finish up here, a few moments to tell us a little bit about some of their efforts locally, how folks might be able to replicate that elsewhere, and maybe how things look coming into the session from your perspective.
Thank you for having me, and I really appreciate meeting all the new members. I'm very excited. Unfortunately, we know each other now, but it looks like we'll know by Zoom for quite some time. Russ really hit on a lot of those points, and he actually mentioned 3 of my tribes in his presentation. We really are talking about a different language. We talk about, you know, English is a second language. You really have to know the language to thrive and be successful. Well, now we have to be able to connect to the world, to apply for a job, to have any kind of equity and equality in America at this time, including education. So now you see whole schools that don't have students that have the ability to even be educated right now. And we're going on almost a year. And you really see that inequity now with this broadband. We all know it. We all knew it was coming. I mean, I've been a vocal voice since the beginning. This is something that we wanted to do, just like Russ said, do that matching funds where the state can participate with private companies. I've been involved in those communications. I've been involved in those negotiations where really we do not, and my concern is towards the future when we start to legislate, never put the technology in writing. By the time that you could take it to the printers and you're like, this is going to be the technology, it is outdated and we've already moved on. And that means less money. I mean, it really means you're spending less money if you're leaving that technology definition out of your language, because just as Lynn had mentioned, you're starting to spend less money on as the technology goes and getting faster speeds. I mean, this is an evolution and we're moving quickly. So we need to make sure that we assist the on the ground companies, those private entities that are going on the ground, and we're assisting them to build them up. So teams. And what happens is it's really, they know what doesn't work. And that's the great thing that Russ did, which I'm going to mention. Russ has been doing this on a shoestring budget. When Lisa Brown announced that he was the person, the budget was shockingly small. And as a state legislature, we talk in numbers, and it has been incredible the amount that he has gotten done the state without the funds. I mean, it's incredibly small and one of the most important issues in the state of Washington. So I'm just going to lay that out there again. I've been very, very vocal that we as a state of Washington are very thankful to have Russ come in here and do what he has done so quickly, so effectively, and without really a lot of money. And so that is where we really see these broadband action teams. And the legislators on the phone, if you have, a local broadband action team, log in. They probably see me too much. I'm logging in all the time to see what's going on, because if I know what they need and I know what could happen, then if I go to the legislature, we can have that conversation and elevate it. What's been happening is the federal government regulates top down. That's where you see these mapping issues. That's where you see these funding issues, that they know where they're going to be. They know what's important. And it's really those local governments, and then those local communities, and then those small companies that build us up. That's who provides these ISPs, who provides the services. So making sure that we start building it local up and having to prepare, and just like Representative Gregerson said, it's a language. I have whole communities. I have a generation of people, maybe multiple generations, even starting to be getting down to mine, that don't understand how to access it, where to access it, and what the language is. It's a completely different language that we are lacking. So this has to be taught and then move on, because we're losing groups of people and this whole other world, and they're being left behind. They're left behind, I mean, just from banking to education to employment. And so I just want to make sure that, recently we had these fires, and I know everybody knows them, but, we found out that our 911 redundancy program that we've all voted on to make sure we never lose 911 went out for 4 to 5 days. It was 4.5 days in 2 counties. Why did our 911 go down? Well, they based it on this broadband backbone. And then when we lost 911 redundancy. Are you kidding me? How did we not know this? How did we not know that now all of a sudden there are hundreds of, and thousands of people without 911? So we really are seeing these technologies being the basis to just survival. Radio technology went down, fires were going, and people died. And so these are the things that we're seeing, that this isn't just, just to get on social media. This is survivability now in our local areas, and that where we are in technology and where we should be, there's this large gap where we have to work together. It has nothing to do about politics or what side. This is a communication, effective, and life-saving technology. And we're learning we need to catch back up and catch up those generations so we can all participate equally in this whole new world where we want to work and educate and really get healthcare. And that is another huge issue. Like, you can't even get your health records when you go to a doctor or 911 in some hospitals. It's really and some. So happy to participate. I'm happy to be a strong voice since the beginning. And I know we're in a budget crisis, and that just, thank God we have some creative minds. And a lot of those start locally all the way to Russ, who's at the very top. So those creative minds that find those matching dollars and those companies to come in and have the conversations, because we have to get this done now. So thank you so much for having me.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. So we are over time, guys, but I know that there may be some questions, and I'm happy to hold on here and go as long as is needed for folks to get questions asked of Russ or Representative Gregerson or Maycumber or Lynn. So please feel free to chime in here and ask any questions you may have. We kind of sped through the end there, but chime in as needed. Right now is your opportunity.
Hey, Russ, Mike Gonzalez with Franklin PUD. First of all, thanks for all your hard work. Looks like you're doing some really incredible work, so we really appreciate it. But I think you hit the nail on the head in terms of digital equity. I think one of the challenges we face in Franklin County and, on the east side, especially in central Washington, in our Hispanic communities. And it's really interesting. This issue has really come to light in just this past month. And the interesting thing I'm finding is that our Hispanic community is really looking to Franklin PUD to solve to really solve the digital inequity issue. So I'm looking for a little bit of advice, and I'll give an anecdotal story. One of our customers reached out to me and said, I was just in a salon, and there were 5 young kids in there that were doing their online schooling because internet wasn't available in their neighborhood. So we're certainly aware of some of these pockets that don't have internet access, but what's your advice to connect with your office to formulate a game plan? Because I think one of the things we struggle with is, okay, we need the money to solve these issues. We know they're out there. We want to form coalitions. We want to do the best we can. But the rigmarole of the process and going through the right channels. So since I've come on board, it's really come to fruition that this is really the biggest thing that we're facing in Franklin County right now, not only from a rural perspective, but more so in our urban area of Pasco.
Yeah, fantastic. Mike, I'm sorry, I talked over you because I was asking real quick a question, but great work getting done in Yakima Valley Community Foundation, just for you to keep your, and I listed the number over here on the right. They have taken this, again, an example of how to do it. That's it. Yakima Valley Community Foundation has put together a broadband action team that is unparalleled in that region, and they are led by Estaquio Beltran and some tribal members from the Yakima Nation and that community foundation, and they have taken this to a whole nother level. They have translated everything in Spanish that I'm doing. They've come up with a Spanish 800 number. So if you have people in your district that don't have broadband and don't know how to put their information on the map, 800-527-0022. Call in. It's all in Spanish, and they can say, hey, I live at 1234 X Street, and I don't have broadband because I can't afford it. I don't have it because it's not available. And we need every voice heard. So even more important to rally those communities. And you as the PUD, Mike, there, you guys should be leading this effort as well. Get in there with your with the libraries, potentially, with your educational entities there. Start to bring some of the bigger players around. There's a lot of ideas, right? I got a policy that I'm floating around right now called Anchor +1. You'll hear about it as it pops out, but it's all about these anchor institutions are really leading the discussion in these rural communities. So you guys need to be there, and you need to start, but you need to find a champion. Right? If you look at Stevens County, Monica will look at me and she'll go, Deborah Hansen is a champion, right? There's what's her name in Lincoln County? Margie, a champion in Lincoln County, right? Estaquio and Sharon Miracle and those folks, champions in Yakima. So it's going to take that effort to start that, and I think it takes a spark, and perhaps you're that spark to really start to get that going in Franklin County, to where we can see some initiatives. We will have some information for you. We've got some tools. We're building some tool boxes. Monica's team had done a great job of that. We're hopefully taking that to the next level, but we're designing it as we're going. We're designing it on the go, but call me often, email me, I guess there's your answer. I'm sorry. I went into a big, long, blah, 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 but hey, give me a holler. I'll take care of you.
Yeah, no, I'll definitely touch base with you. And we are doing some good things. We've laid 8 Wi-Fi hotspots across the county. We are working with the Columbia Library Association. So we're getting into the library. So we're taking those steps, but it really feels like people are asking us to take a bigger step and really take the lead on that. So I'll reach out to you, Russ. And again, thanks for everything. And thanks to everybody for all they do.
Let me say one more thing to that, Mike, just so you know, we did stand up the drive-in Wi-Fi program in the state. We have over 600 sites. If you go to driveinwifi.wa.gov, you can find something. It was a port in a storm, right? This was no way a solution. It was just a port in a storm. Stood it up, and actually we were proud that the group got a little federal recognition around that as a best practice. But that's there too. So happy to work with you, Mike.
Thanks, Mike. Representative Ybarra, hold on just one moment. I understand, Betty, you might have to leave. I totally understand. I appreciate you being here. And others, if you have to drop, totally understand. I'd like to keep going if there's folks that want to continue to get questions asked. So appreciate you being here. Thanks for coming. And if you need to drop off, feel free. Representative Ybarra, please
go
ahead.
Just more a comment than a question. So it works, you guys. It works at least in my area, my school district, we're sitting at 97% connectivity in our schools, so 97% of the kids have it. We got broadband. We worked with our private companies around here, Microsoft and some of the other folks that work in Quincy. Got hotspots for all our kids. Most of our district is 87% Hispanic. 50% of those kids don't speak Spanish. The school district did a great job working and putting everything in Spanish for the kids, and as well as the school district. We're all fibered up. It's just an affordability issue, which is we were working with our privates as well as our public utilities to get it all done. So there are success stories out there, and exactly what you said, Russ, was we have to team together in order to accomplish what we can.
Great. Senator Short, please feel free.
Thank you. And Russ, I apologize. I had to step away in the middle of your presentation to take an urgent constituent issue. One of the things that as we're thinking about in the Senate, looking at funding packages, looking at proposed policies, the one thing that I keep thinking about when you started the mapping project with the Stevens County BAT team and all of that, we need, my question is that as part of any package going forward as we look, not only the funding and the policy, but to continue the mapping. Am I correct? I mean, that needs to be a part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. We need to, the mapping is not a one and done thing. This is something that's going to continue to evolve. And as a matter of fact, I'm trying to stand up what we're calling speed test week. What I'd like to do is introduce something to schools to where not only are we encouraging the students who are home right now to do a speed test at home. We've got 1.2 million of them sitting at home. We should be able to populate that map. But two, allow that to be a time where kids can start to learn about broadband. Why don't they know about? Why is a bunch of us old fogies standing around talking about broadband? Let the young people. My 5-year-old knows as much about broadband as anybody right now. Let these kids get intelligent, understand why it's important, how it's going to be critical in their future. Why not? Let's put a little time into that in our curriculum. So we're going to be working on that with OSPI to launch that around the state and hopefully just continue that data and then maybe make that an annual thing. We come around and continue to upgrade that map because we want to show all progress in areas where we see hard, like Stevens County. Let's take Stevens County. We want to see that all of a sudden turn into something where we're seeing a lot better connectivity, and show it on the map. So yeah.
Any other questions? Comments? Okay. Well, listen, I really appreciate everybody's participation. I especially want to thank Lynn and Russ for giving us their perspective on this. Representative Maycomber and Gregerson as well for plugging some of the work that they're doing that I think is so important. I want to let everybody know that all of this material, Russ's presentation, Lynn's presentation, and material linking you to what Representative Gregerson is working on, and the recording will all be available at our website, which is pacifictechnology.org. I will send an email around that links back to that, but just so you will get that. But just for your information for now, that's where it will be posted. And if you need any additional information or want to have need contact information for any of the other participants, feel free to reach out to me and I can connect you with whomever the case may be that you need to talk to. So thank you again, folks, for participating. Oh,
can I say one thing before you leave? I can't tell you how proud I am that we have a bipartisan effort here. This is not a partisan discussion. This is a people discussion. And to see you guys working together, this is what's going to move the needle. I am so proud of you people all here on this call right now, coming together to share this common problem, this common challenge. Thank you for being there. That's where we're going to make a difference. I just can't tell you how much I appreciate that.
Yeah, great point. Thank you, Russ. And I echo those sentiments. It's great to have both sides of the aisle covered here. So thank you for joining us. With that, we are adjourned, folks, unless anybody has any last remarks. Thank you, and we're done.
Thank you.